So it's interesting that I had the opportunity to interview you in Egypt
Yes.
during that trip, and you offered your perspective on the work that you do and what Africans should feel about themselves no matter where they are. And now that has turned Tony Browder into a book called The Browder Perspective. Let's talk about uh, let's talk a little bit about your book. Let's start there because it sounds like it encapsulates everything that you've done over the last 40 some years.
Right. Well, the subtitle of that book is My 50-Year Journey to Enlightenment, and it documents the experiences that I've had between 1975 and 2025. That was when I was exposed to information about African history and culture and African spirituality, which helped to define who I was as a young African American man who had just graduated from college and was looking to find my proper place in the world. And so it was my introduction to African spirituality that really confirmed in my consciousness who I was and what my spirit was supposed to do in this lifetime. And that led me to meeting Ivan Van Sertima 2 years later in 1977 when I heard him discuss his book, They Came Before Columbus, The African Presence in America. And it was during that talk that Ivan said that the ancient Egyptians were Black. That was the first time in my life anyone had ever informed me that the founders of the Nile Valley civilization were, in fact, people who looked like me. That's when I began my deeper dive into what I now refer to as knowledge and discovered scholars, discovered information and knowledge which had intentionally been withheld from me. And as I began searching out these various sources of new information, that led to my first trip to Africa, to Egypt, specifically with Dr. Ben in 1980. And if all goes as planned, I will complete my 71st trip to Egypt in December of this year. And so my latest book, A Browder Perspective, talks about my journey and provides a black print, if you will, for how others who are also looking to find their real cultural heritage and identity can do so by tapping into some of the resources that I introduced them to.
You know, Tony, I as I read through this, and I think there's one thing that you mentioned in the book that sort of directed your life was the fact that you said you never wanted to work for anybody. Uh,
Exactly.
your was it your father, I think, or your
My
grandfather,
grandfather, my
right?
grandfather, yes.
Who
Hmm.
sort of you? It's an observation that you had that grounded you into this space that you always wanted to be self-employed. So,
Exactly.
so, and then I go back personally, and I think about a kid in junior high school when Dr. King was assassinated. That was the thing that sparked sort of my interest in Black history because we had a Black history teacher that came after that. So even with what you've done today, what was it about your early years, even before going to college, that made you receptive? Information is given to us, but a lot of times we don't receive it, and
Sure.
so you received this, and it directed you in this path, towards, you know, Egypt, African spirituality, all of that. What was it about your younger years that made you receptive to this?
Well, I just happened to be doing this interview from Chicago. I came here yesterday to receive a award and acknowledgement for from the mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson, at his annual Black History program. And so he acknowledged my work. And so coming home is always a reminder of what my journey has been. I take pride in sharing with people that my mother was 16 years old when I was born. So I grew up in my grandparents' household on the west side of Chicago. And so I was now the ninth mouth that my grandfather was responsible for feeding. And I watched my grandfather, who migrated to Chicago from Vernon, Alabama in the 1940s. I watched him struggle. And I watched him as a undereducated Black man who could not find meaningful employment in Chicago, who was often debased by his employers. And he brought his anger and his frustration home. And I saw the impact that it had on my grandmother and my mother and her siblings. And it was only after my grandfather died that I began to realize the struggles that shaped his life and how that then impacted the lives of everyone in this household. And so I made a commitment to myself that I was not going to give anybody that much power over my life. So that is what has driven my determination to be self-employed. And I'm blessed to say that I've been self-employed for 47 years. And having the ability to control my own finances, my own life, is the greatest expression of freedom. It's allowed me to cultivate my interest in African and African American history. So I spend my money and I buy books, and then I travel to conferences to meet the authors of the books that I've read. And when an opportunity presents itself, I travel to the countries that I've read about in my book. So that's what started my international travels. And because of the fact that I'm creative, and for those of us who are self-employed, we have to be very flexible. I have used my talents as a designer, as someone with a background in advertising, to write information about African history, to make that information, that knowledge, palatable to a people who've been socialized to dislike reading. So I'm using my marketing skills to market what I love, African history and culture. And it's been a blessing for me. I also own my own publishing company. So I've been responsible for publishing almost a dozen books, my books, my daughter's books. And it allows me to live the quality of life that I've always wanted to live, and help to liberate the minds of sisters and brothers who matter so much to me in the process.
And that liberation of the mind is what, I think a lot of people get out of listening to you and reading your books and reading the books that you refer to people, because in this book, you give, after you give your perspective, you give a book list, right? So
Exactly.
yeah, but it's the spiritual part that really kind of resonates, because it's not, we look at things sometimes as, I guess, social scientists or whatever, and we, do research or whatever, but there's something deeper here,
Sure.
and something I think you want people to get out of what you have learned and discovered about, our African heritage, about from whence we came, how far back we go. I remember asking you in that interview, I said, do you now, after all these trips to Egypt, um, uh, understand why people say, we came from the kings and queens of Africa? And you're like, I hate that. I hate that. So, I mean, talk about the spiritual connection that you've made and that you hope other people are making as they listen and read what you, purvey.
Sure. Well, let me just add some context to what you just said. I
Okay.
dislike people saying that we were kings and queens, because less than 1/10 of 1% of Africans on the continent were kings and queens. The vast majority of people were teachers, were writers, were physicians, were healers, were carpenters, were masons. And that still holds true today in any society on the planet. So we have a tendency to focus our attention on the highest ranking among the pyramids in our societies, and forget the people who make the kings, who make the queens. So that's where our power really lies. And the king or the queen only represents the masses of the people. So I'm about acknowledging the masses who make everything possible. Everything that exists, everything that we know about the past, ancient Egypt, for example, we know because of the artists, the engineers, the architects, the designers, the people, the civil servants who maintained that institution. And so those are the people, those are the lives that matter. And so with regards to your question concerning spirit, what I also have come to understand, based on my 68 trips to Egypt thus far, based on my 15 years of excavating and restoring Kushite tombs on the West Bank of Luxor, Egypt, based on my travels to West Africa, what I know, not what I think, not what I believe, but what I know is that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, that our bodies are temporaries, but our spirit, our souls are eternal. And what we find from studying Nile Valley civilization specifically is that they had a social system in place where they acknowledge the temporary nature of the body, but the immortality of the soul, or the Ba, as it was called in ancient Egypt. So there were processes for the evaluation and the elevation of the soul of a deceased person. There were processes in place for honoring the spirit, the memory of those ancestors who are no longer here. So it's about ancestral acknowledgement. It's about ancestral reverence that society had focused all of its attention on. So we have inherited some of those same traditions without really understanding its source or understand how to connect into that spirit. For example, the idea of taking flowers to a grave. That began in the Nile Valley. There were rituals every week. There was a ritual that was performed by sisters of the 25th dynasty where they did that. This idea of pouring libation is a process that began in the Nile Valley. So that's a part of our essence. And so it's simply a matter of us remembering who we were before our historical and cultural memory was disrupted by the Ma'afa and enslavement and discrimination, and tapping into the best of that spiritual power that has always resided in us, and affirming that so that we can tap into that source, which has always been our guide. The reason why Africans in America are some of the most envious people on the planet is because of that African spirit that has never been suppressed. And so now what this current regime in power are forcing us to do is to remember who we were and turn back to those institutions that we created before integration, that educated us to be proud sons and daughters of Africans, and to find ways to enlighten and empower our children so that they won't be confused about who they are and the greatness that resides within them.
One of the things, and I'm not going to, I want folks to go out and get your book, which let's talk about that though, that we can get the book. Tell us where the book is available.
You can get the book at Sankofa. You can get the book at Mahogany's. You can get the book in Baltimore at Everyone's Place. You can purchase the book from my website, ikg-info.com. Like you, I am a firm believer in supporting Black businesses. So we want to support those people that have a vested interest in the maintenance of our community. Yes, you can get the book from other places, but Jeff Bezos don't need our money. Let's spend our dollars with people who affirm our identity and will feed back and support institutions that also do the same.
Going back to the point that you were making about spirituality, it said, you wrote, for centuries we were taught to look upward for deliverance when the real source of power has always been inward.
Yes.
Um, and you just spoke about that, but that we go to church and we're looking for we believe it's not a God thing, but let me not explain it. I want you to explain it.
All right. Well, something that I've learned from my association with psychiatrists and psychologists. The brain is an associative organ. The brain responds to specific and direct thoughts and speech. So the brain cannot process the word belief. The brain cannot process the word hope. That sends it into this loop where it doesn't know where to go. You have to give your brain specific instructions as to what you want to create, what you want to come into existence. So part of Nile Valley Studies, part of knowing yourself is to know that the Creator resides within us, and that we as human beings have the capacity to co-create. We can bring into existence those things that we desire. So it's critically important to educate the mind to understand that what you think, what you speak, you bring into existence. So those are powerful tools that can be used to either create heaven on earth or hell on earth. And as Dr. Carter G. Woodson said, when you control a person's thinking, you don't have to worry about their actions. So everything that we do should be about the controlled use of our thought, the controlled use of our speech, in order to manifest on the physical plane of existence that which we want our children's children's children to inherit. So if we aren't thinking at least 3 to 7 generations into the future, if we are thinking about creating the world that we want our precious children to live in, then we have failed them. We have failed them. And another quick point I want to make, I see you're watching the clock, Denise, and we all
Yeah.
monitoring time. I've got a plane to catch in a couple of hours.
Oh,
So
wow.
uh,
Okay.
I, I lost a dear friend,
Yeah.
Dr. Charles Finch, on the day that we had our book launch on January the 17th. Charles Finch was the person, one of the organizers of the Nile Valley Conference, which was held at Morehouse in September of 1984. And it was that conference that cemented in my consciousness what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. When I saw these scholars, historians, psychologists, physicians, educators talk about the value of Nile Valley culture and civilization. And so what we are doing in DC next Thursday, the 26th of January, is having a 40-day ascension ceremony to acknowledge the spirit of Dr. Charles Finch. And so
30,
that
26th of February.
the 26th of February, which is the
Okay.
day after what would have been Dr. Finch's 78th birthday. So
Okay.
within traditional African spiritual societies, it is um, the reality is embraced that when a person dies, their soul reviews their life over the course of 40 days. And then in ancient Kemetic civilization, they have the scene of the weighing of the soul, where the soul is weighed opposite the feather Ma'at, and one has to declare their innocence by reciting the 42 admonitions of Ma'at, from which the 10 commandments were derived. And after that declaration of innocence, and if the heart is found to be as light as a feather, if the person has lived a righteous life, then they go on to reap the reward in the afterlife, and then that soul becomes an ancestor. So it takes 40 days after a person's death before they become an ancestor. So we're going to be working with the Adasi sisters and several other Washington, D.C. stalwarts that you and I know very well and respect very highly. We're going to formally welcome the spirit of Dr. Charles Finch into the ancestral realm, where we can now, for the rest of our lives, call on him as an ancestor to inspire us, to direct us and guide us as we continue to do our work here on the earthly plane.
Before that sound that's and that's going to be where?
That's going to be at the Thurgood Marshall Center, 1816 12th Street Northwest, between 6 and 8 p.m. And I'll share with you the link. That event will also be live streamed. So I'll share that with you, Denise, so you can share with your listeners
Wonderful.
and viewers.
As I said before, we could be here all day and night with all the questions that I have and all the responses that I'm sure you could give. But I'll just ask, I know that you had a book signing, a book release and book signing at Thurgood Marshall about a month or so ago. Are you going to do that again? Are you planning
Right.
to? Mhm.
I'm waiting for Sharikiana at Sankofa to confirm a date. They want to have my signing somewhere on the campus of Howard University. I've been in contact with the owners of Mahogany Books, and they will be doing something soon. So more than likely, those events will take place in March or April. I'm getting ready to go out on a book tour at the end of March, and I'll be traveling to the south, and then April I'll be in California, and May I'll be in Texas, and we'll be selling some books and
So
raising some minds.
will
Yes,
folks be able to go to the website to find out where you will be and over the next couple of months?
absolutely. All of the details can be found at the IKG website. Yeah, thank
Okay.
you for that shout out.
And I know you're going, you have two trips. I don't want to say final, because I know they won't be final, but two, I mean, trips where you're taking people to Egypt over the next, well, this year. And then you're
Yes.
passing the baton to your daughter. Talk about that a little bit before we go.
Sure. I took my daughter to Egypt with me when she was 7 years old in 1989. And then we published her first book a year later. And at the time we published my book, my daughter was 7 years old. She was the youngest published author in America. That book was entitled My First Trip to Africa, and it was about her trip to Egypt. So by the time she went to Hampton University, she had published 2 books about her travels around the world with me to discover the African presence. And she found her world history professor was using my book, Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, to teach African history. So I have immersed my daughter in her history. I've assumed responsibility for teaching her who she is as a person of African descent. So she's been to Egypt. She's been to Egypt 20 times. And she is well prepared to take over my study tours to Egypt so that I can visit some other countries in Africa. I want to go to Cameroon. I want to go to Burkina Faso. I want to go to some other places and share what I find in those places with my audience. So I can pass the baton to my daughter. I now have a grandson, and he's going to travel with us to Africa. And Atlantis, at the appropriate time, will pass the baton to him. So I am now making my last 3 trips to Egypt this year. We've had such a demand in the July and the December study tours that we added a 3rd date, and that 3rd date is June the 16th through the 30th. People
Okay.
can go to our website and get details and sign up for that tour. And if all goes as planned, I'll probably be taking over 300 people to Egypt this year on my final study tour before I pass the baton to my daughter.
Well, full disclosure, I'm preparing to go with you in December. I want to experience that winter solstice that you talked about. I'm not sure what's
Yeah.
planned, but I'm open, and we will come back and report on that trip to those who did not were not able to attend. But Tony, I want to thank you so much for being with us today. I really tell people you need to pick this book up. You need to read it. You need to read it. You might have to read it a couple times, and and then come and hear him speak if you haven't already, and just experience the spirituality that exists within. I want to thank you for being with us today.
And Denise, thank you so much, and all the best to everything that you and your organization are doing. I look forward to seeing you soon.
All righty, likewise. Safe travels.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.